Hey guys, this is the microgreen room. Before you get in here, this is where we usually put our phones, wallets, and anything like that that we won't bring in here. So once we get in here, we have this is our big shelf. This literally holds pretty much everything from Ziploc bags, egg cartons, to towels, just spare lids and stuff like that. This is where we sign. This is a laptop or a computer you use to sign in. This is where we put our microgreens. This is our worm bin. You'll learn more about that in a future video. So below this table, like I said, dirty rags. This is our shelf. This is where we find our parts for our LED lights and stuff. This is where we always keep our first aid kit. Is right here, right beside this box. This is our shelf. This is where we put our dishes to dry and whatnot. Over here, just more space to do dishes. Here's our Dutch bucket system. You'll learn more about these in a future video, but like I said, these are right here. And then we have, this is our table for microgreens. This is where you put them once they're ready to come out of the germination rack. Up here we have another hydroponic system, and down here we also have one of our hydroponic systems. So this is where all of our harvesting takes place, whether it's microgreens and whatnot. We weigh it, scale it, put it in the fridge. It all starts right here. Underneath the table we have all of our different kinds of seeds. So we got some buckwheat, amaranth, chia, and stuff like that underneath here. So over here is our planting table. Planting table, this is how we go from, we have our compost, or excuse me, our dirt or peat moss in this green tote. We'll plant here and it'll all go over here at the germination rack. So after the lettuce gets ready to be planted into the systems, you will see stuff like this, our cups over here. So these are our rocks we use to give foundation to the plant. We also use this recycled glass. In here we have our cups that we plant into. These are, like I mentioned before, the containers that we give our microgreens in. Some other containers for lettuce. And then we have all of our hydroponic pumps and other tubing in there as well. So back over in this left corner, this is where you keep your trays. So your planting, your solid bottom, and your toppers go here. Like I said, if you run out, feel free to go over there and get your trays off the top of the blue rack or purple rack.
This room its sole purpose is to produce food, healthy food for our daycares at Fairplain and at Spencer. So with that comes food safety. So that's a big thing, especially now with Corona and this virus going around. Especially we hit the head on the nail with safety. But I'll go over some things that we do. So first things first, when you come in here, you're always going to wash your hands and then sign in. So we're trying to limit how much germs are being produced on our computer, because everyone's going to sign in there in this room. So always wash your hands when you come in here. Second thing, Parker's talked to you about our safety with our knives. Always remember to be careful with these, they are sharp. But today's whole purpose is when we're doing harvests on our microgreens and our lettuces, always make sure to wear gloves, okay? And your gloves will be located in the corner where all of our data sheets and all those are. You should know that with all the videos we've done. We did a quick tutorial on everything in here. But make sure you always wear gloves and wash your hands before you harvest. Now, that doesn't mean put your gloves on and then go do random tasks of checking other things, turn the compost bin. Once you put those gloves on, your sole purpose is to harvest microgreens or lettuce. And with that, it comes with clean utensils. So always make sure, usually when you're done harvesting, you'll put them over there to be washed. What I always like to do is for scissors, since we do that, we use scissors for our lettuces. I always run it over, go over there, put some soap on it, scrub it real fast, and rinse it off. It's easy, it's quick, and it just saves some hassle if there is germs on there or something that shouldn't be on there that didn't get washed the other day. Because sometimes we get in a rush and sometimes they don't get washed very well. So just before, make it a little habit to go over there and rinse it off and wash it. It's pretty simple. But like I said, once you do that, your sole purpose with these two gloves is to harvest your microgreens and your lettuces. So that means you should have your bowls, your trays on the table, everything you need ready. So when you put those gloves on, you have it all there, and you don't have to go around touching everything. Because once you start touching everything with these gloves, they're useless. They're basically like your hands. Like right now, these are, I'm gonna have to throw these away, but it's just a tutorial. But you're gonna have to make sure when you put these gloves on, harvest, come back, take them off, and use them with their purpose. And when it comes to that, when we box our stuff up, so let me go get a container. When you come back with your gloves, you're also using your gloves to put your harvest, lettuce or microgreens and your containers. So we want to keep this as germ-free as possible. Sometimes it's harder than it looks because you don't think about it. Once you get done harvesting, you might start going and doing other things. You got to make sure that right away you're putting this stuff in here and putting it in these fridges, because this food, it doesn't go to a store. This is going straight to our daycares, and while they'll rinse it off, this stuff should be clean for them to eat.
It's important to go over this checklist. We have some just basic stuff of, you can just go through and read that. But it's important to realize that there's more to the list. There's more to the microgreen room than just this list that we'll explain more later in a future video. So here we have all our nutrients and pH up for our systems. We have all of our seeds in smaller containers, and we have even more up here. So we have a bunch of different varieties of seeds to plant. Over here, this is where we soak everything. Certain seeds need soaking, so this is where we put our seeds to soak for the weekend. And here is where we have our knives, bowls and stuff to soak, to harvest. So this has been, okay, here's also finally important thing about our sink. This is this, we don't use this nozzle whatsoever, and there's no dirt. And so here's our just planting chart. We mark down how much it is to plant for each tray and how many trays we have left. So when we're running low, we let Dave or Zach know that, hey, we need more seeds. So this is our daily plant log. This is what we plant every week. And this stuff is usually soaked on those days. This is our planter. So put the seeds up, fill this with seeds, then you plant. And like I said, before we leave the microgreen room, along with cleaning up, it is important to turn all the water off. All the water off before we leave.
Hello, I'm Chris, and today we'll be going over our data sheet, which is our water data in general. Today, in this video, I'll be talking about pH, conductivity, temperature, humidity, and everything that gets added into our tote. The pH is essentially how basic or acidic the water is. The conductivity is the nutrients that are in the water that the plants use to produce. Temperature is the temperature in the room. Humidity is the amount of humidity that is in the air. And the water add the nutrients and pH up are everything that are in the system to keep it running productively. With our systems, what the connectivity reads is the nutrients that are in the water. We have two different types of nutrients, which we have our grow, which takes care of all our lettuce systems. Any system that we have that is a non-blooming plant, which for those plants, we have our bloom nutrients, which takes care of our tomatoes, cucumbers, and peppers, which is in our Dutch buckets. And they are most always generally under here on this bottom shelf. As well as down here, we have a pH up, which will raise the pH in the system if it is below what it needs to be. I'm going to take you through one of the readings for the system, which is pH and the conductivity. So, the first thing we do is generally we mark our date, which today is the 30th. So we mark the 30th. We mark our temperature and humidity, which is measured on this scale for the day. And whoever does the data for the day will always mark this stuff. And first we're going to do the pH for wick, which is the yellow meter for out of all of our meters. Which is, we take our reading. There's not normally an open hole, but there is a hole for today. The meter is 6.18. So that's a bit high for what we want, but not too detrimental. So we come to our paper and mark 6 under the pH, 6.18 for pH. After you use the meter, you have to clean the meters so we don't transplant anything that could be bad in the machine. So we come over here, we got our hydrogen peroxide spray, which we spray off the meter to cover it completely. And then we get a cup of water and we clean it off in that. That is that meter clean, so we don't transplant anything through it. Next we're going to read the conductivity, which each meter has its own name for the conductivity. Another reason for not transplanting anything, they're used 2 at a time per system. So we turn on our meter, go back to the hole we had opened, and we take our meter, which is 573, which is around perfect for our conductivity for this one. So we come back over to our paper, and under the conductivity tab, we're at 563. And then we do the process of cleaning it over again, which is cleaned between each use, as I stated, for not transplanting anything harmful into our system. So and hydrogen peroxide, you spray it off fully, and you soak it back into the water, which the hydrogen peroxide kills anything that is on it, on the meter that was there. Because dipping it into the water is not really cleaning it, you're just still transplanting it. And after you clean the meter, you set them down on a towel most generally, and you let them air dry, and they get put up at the end of the day after you've seen that they are dry, so we don't trap moisture in the cap and ruin the meter. And then after you've done that, after you do the whole sheet, you would come over here, come back over to the system. Each system has its own outflow tote, which can be found by either labeling on the sides of the tote, or if you can find the outflow on the system. So when we're done with it, we come over here, we check into the tote, which in this case it's a bit low for what we want it. We would add, say, 10 liters to the water, which would get it back above the pump, which is perfect. And for conductivity, we wouldn't add anything to it. Same with the pH. And that is the basics of data entries.
So today I'm going to be showing you all how to plant. So to plant, you need your 3 separate trays. I'll discuss those here in a second. So you have your regular planting tray, you have your solid bottom tray, and your topper. So before you plant, you want to inspect the trays. So by inspecting the trays, specifically the solid bottom tray, you want to hold it up to the light. By holding it up to the light, you will be able to see any cracks or holes in the tray that might cause it to leak when we fill it up with water. So the planting tray, you can see has all kinds of holes. I'll turn it over and show you too. So once it gets into the solid bottom tray, this will allow water and the roots for the water to come through and help the plant. The solid bottom should have 0 holes or cracks in it, keeps the water, and it helps give the foundation to our planting tray for our seeds. So, if you, like I said, after inspecting the tray and it's good, there's no holes or cracks or anything, we're going to put this tray like this into the solid bottom tray. And so afterward, we're going to get our dirt. It's typically going to be in this green tote. Dirt, peat moss is typically what we use. So what I like to do is about 2.5 scoops. Per tray. And if 2.5 doesn't work, I typically find a happy medium to get the whole thing covered. So we'll get a little bit more here. So afterwards, after you get your peat moss or dirt planted, you want to flatten it out for the most part, even it out. And then you'll use a smasher to try to even it all up. If there's any holes in the tray or whatnot, use a bit more dirt to fill those holes. So, after you get the dirt ready, it is time to get your seeds. So, now it's time to plant. So, usually we have our daily seed chart or weekly chart. This is our what we plant. Today's Tuesday, so we have a red streak and a broccoli. But for this video, I'll be just planting the broccoli. So, what we need, we'll need our scoop, we need a scale, and our broccoli. So, looking at the chart here, we know the specific amount we use per tray, so we'll use 1 ounce. So, get the scoop. You want to make sure you set it to 0, the scale to 0 afterwards. So all we're doing here is just getting 1 ounce of broccoli. So, like I said, you measure it, set the scale to 0, then you get 1 ounce worth per broccoli. And afterwards, we want to mark it down with a tally mark that we planted 1 broccoli, so that we can slowly go from 159 trays to 158. So with that allows us to keep track of how many weeks or trays we have left, and if we're running low, we tell Dave or Zach to order us some more seeds. So after you have your seeds, we're going back over to the table. So typically, we want to start out on the sides of the tray and work our way in. Like I said, you want to start from the outside of the tray and work your way into the middle. So when it comes to planting, you don't want to just do that with the causes a mess. So just move your arm and your wrist. That allows the seeds to come out. Just don't do that. It creates a mess and it doesn't germinate very well. So after we plant, you want to get your topper tray And then I'm going to spraying the top. That's going to allow it to get ready to grow in the germination rack. And before it goes into the germination rack, we want to put a bit of water into the bottom of the tray. When planting, typically, I'll just look this up for a second. The safe bet is always to try to fill those divots in the bottom of the planting tray. That is always a safe bet when, like I said, when it comes to planting. So afterwards, you need to get you some tape and a Sharpie, and all you're going to do is make a label for the tray. So when it comes to the label, you want to write down what tray it is. So in this case, it's going to be broccoli. You also write down the day, and you also write your first and last initial on the tray, just in case anything goes wrong or why it doesn't germinate. We can always go over why it didn't germinate well. So just a learning thing for everyone. So what I like to do here too is just personal preference. I just like to lightly spray the seeds. Get the soil up top wet too, just enough. And then after that, we put the tray in the germination rack, and it'll sit here typically for about 5 to 6 days. It just depends. Sometimes they'll go longer, sometimes it's shorter. It just depends on how fast the seeds would like to grow. So, like I said, typically 5 to 6 days. This is from the 23rd. It's been 6 days now, but you can see that not all of it has been fully germinating. So this is a case where we will keep this here for a couple more days, trying to get a majority of it back to sprouting. And the germination rack, it is important to keep them from the earliest day to today's. And then, like I said, put those in order. And so we'll move this, put this one back up. And that has been planning and the basics of the germination rack. So after the microgreen has reached its 12 to 14 day lifespan, it's time to harvest it. Usually you can see that a microgreen is harvested by its true leaf. However, with the dun peas, it's a little more different than that. So once it gets to a certain height, we know it's time to harvest. So what you need, we're going to need our knife, some gloves. Gloves are always important when harvesting and planting. And then we'll need a scale and weigh it, and then get ready to send it to building blocks, which is at our daycares. Now that we have our gloves, our scale, our container, and our knife, it's time to start harvesting. So when harvesting, we always want to be careful with the knife, regardless of what kind of blade it is. Still knife, gotta be careful. So when harvesting, we want to get as close to the bottom as we can without getting any dirt or seeds and whatnot. Because, like I mentioned before, this goes to building blocks or airplane, which is our daycares, and we don't want to have any dirt or seeds for in the food and whatnot. So, real simple, just kind of grab you a handful and see, if you get a seed, just take it off. It's not a big deal, it's not the end of the world. Like I said, the more important thing is not having any dirt in our correct. So after we finish harvesting our microgreens, it's time to weigh them. So typically, these containers weigh about 9.7 ounces, and I can turn this around and show you. But we get 1 pound and 9.4 ounces. So after that, we just do some basic subtraction of 9.4 ounces minus 9.7 is negative 0.3. So 16 ounces minus 0.3 is 15.7 ounces. So that we know that this is 15.7 ounces of gun piece. And so after we would weigh it, we would make a label of the name of the microgreen, how much it weighs, and the day that it was harvested, just to give us and Betty an idea of what to do. So after we harvest it, it goes into the fridge. After we harvest it, label it, goes into the fridge. It'll be time to invoice. So when invoicing, we use a site called QuickBooks. I can show you how to access this. First thing, in the microgreen room, like I said, we use a site called QuickBooks. So all we're going to do is go type in QuickBooks. We're going to log in. We're going to sign in with QuickBooks Online. And so what we're doing here is we're going to use this email and the password. So this stuff will automatically be in on the computer. It has it memorized, so we don't need to put in the email or anything like that. So once we get to this screen or dashboard, all we're doing is going to come to sales and go to invoices. So with our invoices, this just lets us know how we're doing in the microgreen room based on production and how much we are putting out every time we invoice something. So after we get to this screen, we're going to go to create invoice. We're going to go click this drop down arrow for select a customer. So typically 9 times out of 10 it's going to be either building blocks or fair plane, because that's where we send our microgreens to, or lettuce. So this is going to be going to building blocks. So after we click building blocks, Betty's email, she is head of what's going on over there at building blocks. So we just sent her an email with the invoice of how much we harvested and everything else. So I have her email highlighted as well. So after that, we want to make a carbon copy. So all we're doing is we're just sending pretty much the same email, but to this time we're sending it to Zach. So if you want to look over here, his email is at the bottom of the whiteboard. So after that, we can just make sure that there is a carbon copy with Zach's email. So for service date, all we're doing is entering today's date. So if you want to look back over here, we're going to be taking these 3 microgreens and we're just going to type their quantity into this. So the first one's curled cress. Quantity, there's 2.2 ounces. And the unit rate, or how much we charge per ounce of microgreens, is $2. So the rate's going to stay the same when it automatically does the math for us. So we don't have to spend any extra time doing the math. So, like I said, we're just entering today's date. This time it's kale. It's going to be 3.2 ounces. So we're just going to repeat that same process again. This time, but with broccoli, it's going to be 4 ounces. So if we were to add let's say another microgreen, or we just got new seeds, and we're just trying out this completely new microgreen. So 1/8. So I don't really have a clue. So we have a thing called Drew's Mix. That's there, but if it wasn't, so just just type a little something for that, just to use an example. So to add a product, so we're going to go to non-inventory, category is going to be under microgreens or hydroponics, whatever, and then all we're doing is just adding a sales price less rate to get our specific whatever we wanted to add. So that's how we add another seed or another item to our list of stuff that we harvest. So after we get our invoice completed, like I said, you always want to make sure before you send it that we have the carbon copy, just in case if anything goes wrong, Zach has it or Betty has it. We want to make sure that all the values are correct, and then after that we just hit save. This is just what the invoice is going to look like, and we'll just hit send and close. And then if you want to look at over here at the status with the overdue and such, all we're doing with those is just letting them know that we received the payments. So this has been just a basic overview of how to do invoices, and like I mentioned before, this just helps us keep track with how we're doing in the green room based on how much money we're bringing in and how much we are producing.
Hey guys, it's Trevor here, and today we're doing a little hydroponics planting session. So, talked about harvesting, now we're going to talk about how to actually plant it. So, if you come over here, we always plant our lettuces the exact same way as Parker told us of our microgreens. So if you remember the video of Parker talking about planting microgreens, that's how we're going to do our lettuce. There's different ways to do it, but that's how we personally do our lettuce. As you can tell, our lettuce is the same as the microgreens when it's the baby stage, alright? When it's really small like this, you don't want to plant it because, as I'll talk about over here, our cups are a pretty big size, and there's a specific way we plant. But you do not want to keep these lettuce plants in these trays more than a couple months, because when you start doing that, like I said, they're not pulling any nutrients from these trays, this dirt soil, so you're going to have to pop them in these systems as soon as possible. But as you can tell, this is only 12:15, so we've got pretty good time on it. So if you want to move over here to the planting table, means we'll show you how to plant. So with our tray, we are going to want water in the bottom, like this. Preferably a little more, but this has been out for a while, so we'll fill it up in a bit. But because when you have water in the bottom, if you leave them out for too long, these plants will start to die when we put them in. So you always want to have water. And then they'll have, just like Parker talked about when we did the microgreen planting, there's always going to be a solid tray, and that's what you want to use because you don't want holes in them. So you can put water in that. And then just where we got the rocks, the clay balls, there's going to be a tray like this with holes in it with our cups. All the planting stuff will be in one section, like I've talked about. That's our cup, and all this stuff will be in a section over there where I talked about. So this is where you'll get all this stuff to plant. So today we're going to be planting a little gimlet. So the key thing for this, preferably you want to get the biggest plants first, and then go to the little ones, because if you get the big ones at first, they don't have time to grow over a couple of days. So, as you can tell, and be very easy on these because there's a lot of lettuce seeds and they're really small, so they sometimes get compact, and we try to limit that. But as you can tell, sometimes it's just impossible to do that. So you just have to be really gentle when you pull them out. It's pretty easy. Yeah, you just want that. What Sawyer has in his hand. And then we each get a cup. And our primary goal for this is to get the little root in the bottom of the hole. There's a hole in the bottom of this cup right here. And it's pretty simple, but it takes some time. So you'll get the hang of it after a while, but I'm sure whoever's watching this, you're pretty new at this, and don't get discouraged. We all went through the pains of planting. So it takes some time, but you'll get the hang of it, I promise. So you want to get your rocks. Always make sure this is in the middle of your cup, because as you can tell, some of our lettuce plants when I harvested were flimsy, and that's a result of these plants not getting in the middle. So you're going to poke that through the middle. It takes some time. Don't get discouraged. You're going to pull it. Oh. Good. So, as you can tell, bottom root is in the cup, and it's harder with the when they have a couple leaves like this on them, because you got to hold it. So, me and Sawyer are ready to plant. He's got it bottom of the root, holding it like this in your hand. And you want to be gentle with these leaves, because if you squeeze them too hard, you'll kill them. And when you put them in the hydroponic system, they'll die. So we don't want to do that. So we both get our rocks and start putting in the clay balls. Now, you have to watch out. Sometimes the root at the bottom will get pulled out if you're putting these rocks in too fast. So you always have to make sure this root right here is in the bottom of your clay or your cup. Very important. Some of our systems don't have the highest water levels, so you're going to want to make sure your seeds are in the bottom like this. And then you just fill out your cup around the root system. And don't worry if your plant is so small that you're covering up some of these leaves right here, because those are the baby ones. These are the big ones, so that's what we're really worried about, because those, you can't really accommodate to those. So don't worry if you're doing that. Just make sure you get in the middle. Now make sure you're delicate with this. It'll take some practice. It'll take some time. So you can't just go at these really fast, because if you do them really fast, then you're going to have to replant them again, and you just have to go through that process. So if you do it right the first time, you're not going to have to redo it again. So, and you want to have your leaf, your whatever lettuce you're using, pretty sturdy with the rocks, so when it grows up, it's not going to fall down. And when it falls down, they start to die, and our systems are kind of in the process of where if they go through under the pipes, we usually aren't going to be able to harvest those. So try your hardest to get it like this in the middle. Now sometimes you're just going to have some plants that are just going to die, and that happens with all of them. But we try to take our time and do it right the first time, so we won't have to redo it again. And there's mine, and there's Sawyer's. So if you want to look at Sawyer's, that's what his looks like.
I didn't get as big as one as Trevor, so mine's a little bit shorter than his.
But that's okay, because he did it right. If it's not as big, you don't want to have the rocks come piling over it and then it'll die. He did it right. I did it right. Like, we did two completely different plants and they're the same. So you're not going to get the same one as me. We're not going to get the same one as Sawyer. They're different. You just have to watch for that. You're going to have to adapt to your whatever tray you have. You might have big plants, you might have smaller plants. So you just have to look for that. But pretty self-explanatory on root in the hole. Fill it up with rocks. Make sure you're holding it all the time, because if you're not, they'll all go on it, and then you'll have a dead lettuce leaf. So that was the 101 for planting. Once you're done filling this up, and you're always going to want water in it, you're going to want to take your cups and look for a system that you need to fill it in. So right now, Wick, one of our systems, Little Jim, as you can tell, a whole spot over here for our lettuce plants. So you want to plop them in, whatever holes are open, and plant them. And as you can tell, see, some of them just die, and that's not a problem. Just don't get discouraged. They just have to replant them. But most of these are over here are doing pretty good. Just don't get discouraged because it takes some time. We all went through it, but you'll get it. Just make sure you have the base priority of lettuce leaf in the middle with the rock surrounding it so it has a good support system to go up and get like we talked about with our harvesting loads.
Hi, my name is Kenny. I'm talking about the Dutch buckets today, the black tubes. All system has black tubes, but these ones are the most important because it's the only water source the plants get. This right here is a good pace of water. Every day we gotta make sure to check it. Make sure it's not slow dripping or no water is coming out. If there is, we gotta make sure it's pumping. So we're gonna use this one as an example today. All you do is put it in and pump water. So all you gotta do when it comes to these systems.
Hey, I'm Sawyer, and Kenny showed you how to check the black tubes. I'm going to explain what the black tubes are and how to clean the pumps that make the black tubes do their job. So black tubes just put the water into the PVC pipes, so in the other systems, and the ones behind the camera right now. Right, and these, it just basically pumps the water, the black tubes puts the water throughout the system, gives it to the plants, and then the black tubes lead that into these PVC pipes, and the PVC pipes carry the water back through into the tote. I don't know if you can see the tote right now, but it's the big old blue one. And so that's where all the water leads to, that's where the water sits. And so I'm going to show you how to clean out the pump that pumps the water, cycles it through the whole system. So you need a toothbrush, right here's the one I have, and always unplug it, just so it's not going to suck up air while it's out of the system. And then you're just going to take off the lid, move it to the side, just wherever you want, and you're going to pick up the pump, and you're just going to scrub it with a toothbrush. So you see right here's the vent, you can scrub right there. You can scrub under, or not under, sorry. You can scrub in the back. Just make sure you hit all the holes that water will go through. You can even scrub around here if you want. And the whole point of scrubbing is just so we're cleaning it, we're making sure it's not getting clogged, and making sure it's still doing its job, and it doesn't disturb the water flow throughout the system. So once you're done, you put it back in there. And the water dripping from the side right now is just the water draining from the PVC pipes. That's always going to happen. But this pump's job is just to pump the water out, and the water will go through this and run through the whole system. And then we'll go back into the black tubes that Kenny showed you how to clean. And once you're done with that, you're just going to put the lid back on, go back to wherever you unplugged it, plug it back up, and then the water is going to start circulating back through the system. And that's how you clean the pump, and that's the purpose of the black tubes and cleaning the pump in general.
And today we're doing a little video on how to harvest lettuce. It's pretty self-explanatory, but again, it takes time. So, as you can tell, we have a pretty good yield of lettuce right here. This is after it's grown. This has actually been harvested off before. So today I'm going to tell you how our technique that we harvest. So, there's two ways you can harvest. There's a clear cut method, and there's an individual leaf method, and that's what we do. So now it's going to take you a little more time to do this, but we get way more yield than we would clear cutting. So, as you can tell, you're going to look for the biggest leaves out of the bunch. So, it's pretty easy to tell, especially when you have a big yield like this, to tell which ones are harvestable and which ones aren't. Just use your self-judgment, but it's pretty self-explanatory. And when we do that, we want to harvest just straight off the stem. And you want to get as close as possible so there's room for the lettuce to grow in the middle. Because if you keep harvesting, as you can tell, right off this stem, these are all been harvested off of, it's just going to keep growing up. Now, months and months later, it's gonna quit growing. But you'll learn that in the long run. But right now, this has been going for about 3.5 months, and we're still getting really good harvest off it. So as you can tell, you want to make a good point on cutting it as close to the stem as possible. Some of these aren't, but because when you do that, these little stems are still sucking nutrients from the water, and when it's doing that, these leaves up top aren't getting as much nutrients. So it's not that hard. If you want to watch me for a bit, cut a couple. So snip, snip. See, as you can tell, right off the stem. And so this is a little gem lettuce that we do. It's a little more spread out, as you can tell. So it's pretty easy to harvest this. It doesn't take much. But when you get the lettuces like our Lola Rosa, they're in big balls. And our bok choy we do, that's pretty easy too. But some of that, I'll show you later when we do it, but this is the only lettuce we have right now. As you can tell, most of these are ready to harvest. So when you're up here, you're not just harvesting, you're actually going to check, I'll do this one, the root system. So as you can tell, this root system is very healthy and white. So when it is not, so when you look at this, you know your plants are healthy. So if you're having some trouble with your lettuce and it's starting to die, you might want to check the root system. If it's brown, then you have nitrogen burn. And when you have that, these root systems will be all brown and they'll start to die, and then your lettuce plants will start to die. So when you check for your root systems and nitrogen burn, you're also up here checking for bugs. So when you're checking for bugs, they'll be very small on these leaves, mostly on the stem, and when it's portioning out to the leaves, and they'll be white, and they're called aphids, and they're really small, and a lot of times also, they'll be in the middle of your plant, your lettuce plants, and they'll start to eat away at your leaves, and if you see that problem, you're immediately going to clear cut this. You're going to want to at least basically cut. So see, we kind of have it divvied up in parts. You're going to want to get all these ones infected around these, because you don't know. You might not see bugs on them, but there's little eggs in the between that you can't tell. So you just want to clear cut most of this, and then we have a soapy spray that we'll talk about later that you want to spray on and wipe off. So it's kind of, there's some things to look out for. If your leaves are getting tip burn, these will be all wrinkly, and you'll just tell that they've been burned up. They look like they've been just set afire. That'll be the lights, which we've kind of eliminated that problem, and then we'll go more depth on the serious problems and ways to combat that. But that's called tip burn, and it mostly comes from your lights or the nutrients that you're